Hi, and thanks again for joining me on Monsta MTV today. And we are talking about one question that comes up quite frequently from many of our customers about, can you paint over oil-based paints? Many of you would have older homes or inherited, invested in a place where you might be doing a reno or a flipper job, and you're going to paint over an existing surface. And if that's an aged paint, then more often than not, it could be an oil-based paint. And for those of you who've tried before in removing old paint, it can be a real tough job and a lot of elbow grease required, but you might be happy to find out that many times you don't have to remove the paint. You can actually paint over it with a water-based paint, even if it is an old oil-based paint, which is a huge time saver, and also it's less destructive on your surface, either the walls inside or outside your home. So firstly, like anything that we say with Monsta paints, surface preparation is key. Very, very important that you assess the condition of the surface. You've got old paints on there and there's multi-layers. You've got to remember that if you have a paint that's there and you can see a line between the old coats, that's not going to disappear with the work you're going to do with the new paint. So how you prepare your surface is how your new finish is going to be. The new paint is not going to be a miracle product that will take out bumps and lines. Really important to remember that. So if you do see that, you may then need to use either a patching compound like our Patch It, or you will have to sand, or worst case scenario, grind some of the old layers of paint off first. Do not ever paint over existing paint if you suspect it could be loose or flaking, or it might go loose or flaking, because some of those old oil-based paints are quite rigid. You might find that you see those flakes and you just crack them open or crack them in half. If that's going to happen, it will separate from your surface and bring the new paint off. So really important to find out what that looks like. The other thing with oil-based paints, sometimes you'll find they're ultra glossy. If they are really, really shiny ones and they're aged, you may, in that case, need to either etch it or give it a little bit of sand, just to slightly roughen it up. Our Prep Coat Primer, which you're seeing on screen now, is a great primer to be applied over oil-based paint surfaces. The key is though, you've got to have cleaned the surface. So a good wash down with a detergent and flush it over with a wet wipe after, or you can use a sugar soap. Clean that surface first, then the prep coat goes on it. But if it's a really shiny surface, almost feels glazed, get the finest sandpaper you can first, sand that down, then use a prep coat, and then you paint with your Monsta paint. Really important. Now, depending on the areas, this is what you need to focus on as well. Kitchens. Those of you doing old kitchens, it was very common in the old day that you will find kitchens that have a smooth paint with in an oil-based format, and a lot of the times those surfaces, because they're not very absorbent, in kitchen areas, just from cooking, if it's around where stoves and ovens are, have absorbed either oils or fats just from the atmosphere of where you had that cooking activity. And when you run, it might look like it's clean, but you rub your hand on the surface and you can feel that slight greasy effect. That is so important that you remove that. So if you have that situation, sugar soap is not going to get rid of the grease, neither is the detergent. You may need to get a degreaser. There are some good biodegradable ones on the market. You can go to your local hardware store, find those degreasers, remove that first, ensure that that surface has got no grease or grimy effect to it, otherwise it will impact your paint application. The next one, you might recall a few months ago we spoke about lead paints. Lead painted surfaces are very, very dangerous. You do want to remove them if you can, because the fact is the risk is you've got lead in the home. You don't sand, you don't grind. If you're not sure about whether you have lead paint, you might recall I had one of these things which is just a lead tester. There's multiple, I'm not promoting this brand, but there's multiple lead testers on the market that will allow you to determine, A, is my old oil-based paint lead? If it is, you need to follow some safe instructions on how you remove that, and there are some paint removal products on the market to do that. If it's not, you know confidently you can give that clean down, as I mentioned earlier, get the Monsta Prep Coat on there, and then paint the surface. Interior and exterior. Oil-based paints have been used both inside and outside the home. You'll find that the exterior ones, if they've been exposed to weather, are actually probably easier to paint over because they're not as shiny, they're more prepared. You still need to clean them because you've obviously collected dirt and grime from outside with wind, etc. But ensure that Once you've cleaned that down, again, it could have been out in the weather, and if it's weathered, it may have deteriorated to the point that it could be coming away from the surface. You can get a bit of duct tape to do a pull-off adhesion test, what they call a crosshatch test. Check that out on YouTube. You'll find there's lots of videos showing you how to do that, and ensure that paint is well bonded first. Once you know that's the case, prep coat primer, and off you go. External, obviously you make sure that the prep coat can be used both inside and outside, but obviously you've got to use our exterior paints for external areas and the interior paints inside. The last piece on the oil-based paints which comes up, more often than not, you might find that even if the home's maybe even built in the 80s and 90s, they may have used an acrylic paint on the walls, but around architraves, window sills, timber awnings, etc., that's where oil-based paints were used because they can take a lot more impact resistance, they're a lot harder. There are some really good water-based paints now in the market that you can use as an alternative to get that same effect in those areas without having to use a solvent-based enamel on those areas. So do your research first. Monsta doesn't have that in their range at the moment. We will be bringing out paints for those areas later on this year, but really important that you focus on selecting the paint that's going to give you that effect, because if you use a soft acrylic where you've got kids walking around or you're going to bump around onto timber architraves or window sills, it's just going to get damaged and scuffed and scratched, and you're going to be disappointed with your paint job. So important on that. If you've got any questions on this, if you've got a specific job, you can shoot them through to our Monsta crew. Don't forget to subscribe to the Monsta MTV channel. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.